Remember Animal Planet? There was once a time when Animal Planet was my favorite channel on TV, for what I assume are obvious reasons. That was back in the days when the logo actually had an elephant on it and not whatever this is. Though I might eventually, this isn't really the video to discuss the history of Animal Planet and its parent company, Discovery Incorporated. There are parallels in terms of both its actual and perceived history with its sister station, the History Channel, which Quinton Reviews covered really well, and I recommend it until I get around to the topic myself. But in case you're not old enough to remember, here's the basic idea. Animal Planet started in the late 90s and used to have shows about animals, and all was good with the world. Then in the late 2000s it switched over to more reality TV-based programming, changed the logo, and added the slogan, "Surprisingly Human," and now it's largely just shows about people who either work with real animals in some loose capacity, or just go looking for fictional ones.
There's a lot of reports about single women being approached by squatches, especially in remote cabins out hiking. Since this is a solo investigation, I couldn't bring a female with me, so I gotta be the female.
Now, Animal Planet has always entertained shows about cryptozoology, mythology, and themes of speculative evolution. Those subjects aren't inherently bad or necessarily inappropriate for a channel like Animal Planet to think about. In fact, they offer a fun opportunity to incorporate and explain various concepts of biology, ecology, evolution, and other related sciences that get your mind working. It all depends on the approach, and I think these shows offer one of the clearest ways to measure the shift in the overall educational quality of the network and its priorities. Many of you are probably familiar with at least one of these programs that aired on Animal Planet and were, at their core, exercises in speculative evolution, as sloppy and/or deceptive as some of their presentations were. There will be a time to look into these, but now is not that time. Not to mention that Billiam covered much of this history pretty well in his video on the topic earlier this year, and I concur with much of his analysis. What I'm surprised Billiam didn't cover, and what most people seem to overlook, is how Animal Planet went from a place where they playfully but seriously brought dragons to life in a biologically plausible way, to intentionally tricking audiences into believing that the US National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the South African government were conspiring to cover up this riveting, totally for real evidence of mermaids and megalodons. To me, that transition point, if you will, is marked by Werewolves: The Dark Survivors, a 90-minute special that aired in October 2009, and presumably never again, that basically tried to give a biological explanation for werewolves. I have to imagine that this was the lowest budget production out of all of these shows, since it's presented as a crime drama, and spoiler alert, you barely see any werewolves in the first place, and what you do see isn't exactly all that close to what you'd consider a werewolf. Then again, maybe that's part of the point. I mean, this isn't exactly what I'd consider biologically plausible. In the spirit of spooky season, and hopping on the recent Spec Evo train that's pretty much departed already at this point, I figured I'd take a look and see how Animal Planet brought these classic monsters to life, while also just kind of poking fun at the lackluster production of the show that was clearly of its time. The story takes place somewhere near Great Lakes National Forest, which Bing Maps tells me is in Michigan. A missing hiker has been found dead in the forest, and Detective Jack Breedlove is on the case. The body shows no signs of having been eaten, and the only real damage is the throat's been ripped out. The local wildlife experts are stumped, but some folks are starting to point fingers at wolves, including this farmer channeling some Alex Jones energy.
I mean, the town folk want us to always vote to reintroduce the wolves into the area. Yeah, and they're cute. They're actually savage beasts. Look at that. We're starting to find out through good resources that the government's actually shipping these animals up through the Great Lakes for tourist season.
What?
During this same news segment, we're introduced to the other main character, Dr. Ivy Carter, who apparently is an expert on North American gray wolves, but currently studies local livestock mutilations, owing to her lifelong background interest in aliens, Satanists, occult groups, and government conspiracy theories, because of course we need someone a little kooky to be vindicated in these types of shows. So after looking her up, Detective Breedlove reaches out to her for whatever expertise he thinks she might have, and they go out to the crime scene where we get this line.
This isn't the work of a wolf.
Well, Doc, something ripped this guy's throat out. And it wasn't a chipmunk.
It's then discovered by the forensics lab that samples of the wounds showed signs of a novel rabies infection, and this is where the show starts to drop a bit of relevant science to explain its interpretation of werewolves, but we'll get the full explanation over the course of the next few scenes. For now, I just want to note that the writers dropped the ball a bit here because the characters are looking at a PCR reading of the virus's genome, which is how you view and analyze DNA and RNA samples, But then Wayne Brady over here says this.
Our people are amplifying the samples right now, but my guess is, looking at this, it's a completely new strain that we've never seen before.
Even though you have to amplify the samples in the first place in order to get a chart like this. Anyway, so the detective is on the way home when he gets a late-night call from Dr. Carter, who hits him with the old,
I need to talk.
Is no one asleep?
Can you get to the university?
Shh. When? Tomorrow?
In half an hour.
It's kind of late.
It's important.
because we need another dramatic face-to-face conversation for something that could be said on the phone or via email. Turns out that the rabies sample, which Breedlove sent Carter from the Magical Forensics Lab, matches with the strain that was observed in a 1,000-year-old cadaver that the university has. The mystery deepens, and the conservatives get triggered.
We've had this in the
Was he an
cooler
Indian?
for forever.
Native American.
The forensics lab's results hit the presses, and all the big media sources start blasting the warning of a rabies outbreak. You can tell it's dramatic because he's in his car talking to himself and furrowing his brows and dropping lines like,
It's all upside down.
something about this little montage I just find funny, but I can't pinpoint whether it's the nigh apocalyptic coverage and archive footage going on in the background, or Wee News.
I'm sorry, I don't
Who news? We news.
And just when it seems things couldn't get any crazier, another attack happens. But this one was caught on tape, which is great for the cop, but bad for the show, because it gives me more opportunities to nitpick. Yes, I'm watching a show where werewolves exist, but my suspension of disbelief cannot support that this is what Michigan looks like in February. I mean, I know we needed to solve the global warming issue like 30 years ago, but damn, I didn't know things had already gotten that bad in 2009.
This incident, this is so supernatural, it's changing the weather, obviously.
Creature appears from the southeast.
Dang, I didn't know the poles were reversed too. So after analyzing the footage and somehow failing to conclude or at least recognize that this is some human-on-human shenanigans, Breedlove brings Dr. Carter out to the crime scene to do some field work. After taking some measurements, the zoologist is able to conclude that the perpetrator is incredibly fast and agile, able to run at 55 miles per hour. He then shows her photographs of the wounds and bite marks on the new victim's throat, which she identifies as being human in origin. Then we get the big scene, after we get the dramatic preface first, of course.
I need to share something with you.
So it turns out that further analysis of the cadaver revealed that the man was not Native American, but rather Scandinavian, specifically a Viking, and he was wearing a wolfskin pelt from a European, not North American canine. Moreover, his cells showed signs of a massive rabies infection, to the point that the viral genome was even showing up in his gonads, which indicates that he was born with this infection as an inherited trait. On top of that, his liver contained what should be fatally high amounts of a chemical derived from the consumption of wolfsbane, because of course, wolfsbane, and traces of the plant itself were found on his person. I'll let the show connect the rest of the dots here.
In
normal rabies, the virus tunnels through the nerves directly to the brain, avoiding the host's immune system. Not our virus. We are descended from an ancient bloodline, a family of warriors with legendary abilities.
Being real aggressive right now. I just want to go back to the crime drama.
Ulfednar, the most feared Vikings of all. The sagas talk of their savagery and superhuman strength, of how, before battle, they drank a potent infusion of herbs that transformed them into supermen, powerful enough to bite through their own shields.
And then we finally get the name drop.
The Viking Kalkfeld Ulf?
Uh-huh.
It means werewolf.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
The victim of the second attack is still alive, though in a coma and peeing purple, which is described as a result of the toxic waste buildup that causes episodes of werewolfism, I guess. Then, because forensics found traces of a chemical disinfectant on the victim's clothing that's apparently common in slaughterhouses, oh, and he'd been drinking cow's blood,
Cow's blood.
we get this little montage and what I think is one of the funniest lines in the show.
Yeah, how you doing? You cut the meat up, right?
Meanwhile, Dr. Carter gets a new, seemingly anonymous tip about a deer mutilation in the woods nearby. Although the coordinates given are in New York, not Michigan, I looked it up, and we find out that she's one of the people that I at least would hate to do forensics and fieldwork with. No camera to take photos, no gloves, no plastic bags to cleanly collect samples, no general regard for preservation of evidence. But who needs proper data collection techniques when you've got Sherlock Holmes flashback powers? The next time they reconvene, Carter and Breedlove, whose visit to the slaughterhouse yielded him a suspect who looks like Wolverine and whose actor's name, I shit you not, is Michael Scratch, discuss their findings and map out the various mutilations and slaughterhouse into what Carter describes as a territory. Highway security camera footage near the deer carcass reveals that the van Wolverine drove was at the scene to pick up the person who presumably killed the deer, so they decide to stake out the house the next day, which we're told is on 187 Landis Row. I wasn't sure why the show gives us the specific address like it's a Marvel movie, since this is the only other one we get aside from the vague Great Lakes National Forest at the beginning, but apparently it's a reference to John Landis, who directed An American Werewolf in London and Michael Jackson's Thriller music video. So, cute reference, I guess. There's some completely irrelevant character development that goes on for way too long before it gets interrupted when Breedlove points out a sound that didn't actually get played before he brought it up.
Listen, real close. You hear that?
Yeah.
What is that?
He goes around to the side of the house and reveals that whoever scripted this is very British.
Ivy, there's something going on. That young girl, I think. I can't see so good, but she's in a bad way. They're taking her somewhere.
Well, I'll follow them.
No.
With Carter basically deserting him and nobody in the house, the detective decides to do some literally unwarranted investigating. There's wolfsbane hanging from the ceiling, jugs of cow's blood, the ice cream truck is out in March in Michigan, you know, the usual. He gets upstairs to a bedroom where he finds some ancient artifacts and watches the clip we saw in the show's introduction, only now with even more footage that is surprisingly professionally edited considering that a 10-year-old made this.
Enjoying the film?
Yeah, I guess.
Dr. Carter finally gets a look at a werewolf in action. She doesn't do much, and honestly a lot of it reminds me of the Twilight vampires more than anything else, including the part where she tackles and kills a deer. I'm sure none of this is related though. The scene ends with this happening.
I think he's trying to say they just move too fast, but...
How does the scene affect it? Oh, the tides are higher. Now I can see you.
From here, the film becomes less sci-fi exposition and more just straightforward narrative-driven crime drama with some 40 minutes to slog through, so I'll breeze through the rest rather quickly because honestly I found it gets a bit boring. After everyone reconvenes at the house, the family explains that the two attack victims were extended family members who were targeted by an outsider, though they haven't found out the identity of the killer themselves and offer to work with Breedlove and Carter under the condition of relative anonymity, which gives us a bit of an insight into the show's portrayal of werewolf life. As you might expect, there's a lot of emphasis on the role of scent, and yes, this gets taken to some mildly uncomfortable places.
I can sense things.
Maybe? I don't know.
I can
Whose
tell
kid
what
is
you're
it?
thinking just from your physicality. I can tell it's
Oh, now he's the doctor?
this morning. I can smell the shampoo in your hair. I can smell if you like me.
Thank you.
You smell if you like him.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Does she? Does she like me?
The household is made up of family members who have the condition, though it's never clear on exactly who is related to whom or how, nor whether they exclusively date or marry or generally just seek out other people like themselves. I'll note that they never use the term werewolf, so whether it's a slur to them I don't know, though Carter gave Breedlove a dirty look when he said it earlier in the show.
You warriors.
Yeah, the werewolves, right?
They do have a word for people who get infected via an attack, which they think is the case for the person who's been attacking their family.
I can't say for sure that he's not born with it, but the chances are that he might be what's called, we call it a bite-in. He's an outsider.
Dr. Carter hypothesizes that the interloper is essentially a rogue male looking for a new pack to take over, and is systematically taking out the adult males in the lead-up to his clash with Wolverine. The show, of course, confirms this for us barely one scene later, as the narrator reveals himself as the killer in question.
A lone wolf. That's me. Searching for a way to make this existence bearable.
Unfortunately for the family, their second member dies in the hospital, the medicines triggering a transformation that he's too weak to handle. With their only witness now dead, the pressure is on before the next, and potentially most devastating attack. Some additional investigation on Breedlove and Carter's part reveals the identity of the rogue. After confirming the established territory of the werewolf family, Carter manages to track down reports of other animal mutilations from a nearby town, and Breedlove goes to investigate their case records. Together they find that there had been reported sightings of a wolfman back in the 90s, with local papers dubbing it the Beast of Grey Road. This is actually another Easter egg reference to the Beast of Bray Road, a real-world cryptid local to Wisconsin that gained some mild popularity in the 80s and 90s. They also discover a report about a teenage boy who'd been hospitalized after having allegedly been bitten by the creature, and Carter realizes that she'd recently seen this guy before, using the power of whatever technique this is. With no backup or authority, she decides to go after him alone. She manages to find the van he's living in shortly after dark and calls into Breedlove, who's gone to the werewolf family house only to discover, by once again breaking in without a warrant, that the place is vacant and completely deserted. Carter eventually stumbles upon the young man himself some distance from his van, nearing the end of a forced transition. Then a jump scare happens, and then another one happens.
Yo, I need a code, bring your ass.
And the rest of the scene devolves into a bunch of shaky cam visual noise before the dramatic final battle. The rogue dies, the cop lies,
We got another wolf attack.
and Wolverine hits a little victory pose without saying any goodbyes. Not in that order, but I had to make the rhyme work. And that pretty much ends the show. The family moves away to places unknown in their super secret white van, and Breedlove and Carter break into the house again to, look at some pictures, I guess. Stepping back to assess the plausibility of what's presented, again, I know this isn't supposed to be taken seriously, and lining it up with real-world history, it's actually not that bad, I don't think. The Ulfednar, I was surprised to find out through researching for this, are actually a real thing in Norse culture and mythology. These were a division of an elite group of warriors commonly referred to as berserkers, though there were also bear and boar warriors apparently, who wore wolfskin and did in fact earn a reputation for their animalistic fierceness in battle. The exact physiological and psychological nature of this state and how it was achieved has been variously attributed to self-induced hysteria, excessive alcohol consumption, and recurrent bouts of generally untreated mental illnesses like post-traumatic stress disorder, in some cases fueled at least in part by henbane, not wolfsbane as in the show, that is known to trigger similar behaviors when consumed in large enough quantities. Indeed, the Ulfidnar are thought to have been at least one cultural inspiration for the European werewolf mythos, though there's nothing in anything I found about them drinking blood or having rabies. The blood diet presented in the show is supposed to be another coping mechanism to help them prevent or at least limit episodes from happening in the first place, though I don't see any biochemical reason for this to actually work. They link it to porphyria, which is a disease where, for any variety of reasons, the body fails to metabolize heme, which is involved in the production of blood, leading to a toxic buildup of other chemicals that aren't being used, hence the purple urine and the symptomatic episodes. Adding blood to the system is at least one of the main methods that can be used to help people affected with some form of porphyria from having an episode, but this is done through transfusions. Consuming blood ultimately isn't going to add more of it to your bloodstream. The idea of rabies being the main cause of the condition is actually not that far-fetched. As many of us currently know due to the global health crisis of the day, viruses can and have made leaps between species and evolved into new forms in order to more effectively stay within the new host. So a new human-centric form of rabies is hypothetically possible, if not necessarily plausible. From an evolutionary perspective, viruses and other pathogens generally have to strike a balance between being effective enough to successfully invade a host's body, while also not causing so much harm that they kill the host before enough of them can actually spread to other hosts. As far as rabies is concerned, humans usually die before they get a chance to spread the disease to other humans, so if a virus were to adapt to become human-centric, it would need to be able to stick around long enough within the body in the first place to give itself the best chance at getting passed along to another human. Many viral diseases that have been with us for a long time, like syphilis and leprosy, actually evolved to become less lethal over the course of our coevolution, so it's not also unheard of for a virus to reduce the severity of its infections if it helps it to produce more viruses in the long run. On top of all of this, some viral genomes can and have left lasting and even active marks on the genetics of their host species, and there's a couple good videos I'll link to that go into this in more detail. The bottom line here is that, while I doubt it would give humans super soldier serum level abilities, I could envision a scenario along the lines of the film's interpretation of werewolves, though it probably wouldn't lead to even the more watered down werewolfy features we see, like excessive hair growth or the facial disfiguration. The overall canine features and behaviors don't really make sense anyway, and are clearly just there to keep the wolf motif, since the show's version of werewolves really don't bear much resemblance to the classical idea. On that note, the show's greatest scientific sin by far is having their wolf expert giving her little spiel involving long debunked myths of wolf sociality.
In the pack, the alpha male is top of the hierarchy. He calls the shots. But no one ever votes for the alpha. He has to fight for it. Sometimes with members of his own pack, sometimes with outsiders.
This is flat out incorrect, and based on research of captive wolves that the author, Dr. L. David Meck, has actually spent the last 50-ish years of his career trying to correct and debunk once he realized how wrong it was. In the wild, wolf packs are multi-generational families. The so-called alpha male and female are in charge because they're usually the parents of everybody else, and new packs are typically formed by offspring going off on their own and meeting up with other lone wolves. Lots of other animals, including plenty of primates, have a social system closer to the classic idea of wolf packs, with males routinely fighting each other to keep power and mating rights. So not only is trying to incorporate wolf behavior already unnecessary, but it's not even an accurate analogy to make. I won't make the leap to say that this was indicative of Animal Planet going downhill in terms of informative content, but the fact that this was included isn't a great reflection of its educational value.
It makes perfect sense if you think like a wolf.
No.
So that's Werewolves the Dark Survivors. Overall, it's not great, nor outstandingly bad. It's just a rather mediocre show that offers a handful of interesting ideas alongside some egregious misinformation. I remember watching this the weekend it aired and not thinking much of it afterwards. It didn't really have the majesty or emotional punch of Dragons: A Fantasy Made Real, nor did it really come across as all that scary either, despite the limited, dark and edgy marketing that came with it, so I never had much interest in rewatching it over the last decade or so. By the same token, the milquetoastness of its presentation doesn't lend itself to infamy in the way future programs in this same little subgenre earned, and because it was a one-off film as opposed to the roughly similar series that Animal Planet was airing at the time, Lost Tapes, I can see why nobody seems to remember this show. This isn't really meant to be a rating review, so I don't really have a score to give it like I did with Alien Worlds, though if I had to rate it, I guess it would fall at a 4 or 5 out of 10. It's not the worst of the Spec Evo genre, but it's definitely not the best either. If you've watched this far, I appreciate your indulging me, and I hope you enjoyed this little one-off project. I've always liked film reviews in this style, so I figured this was a good opportunity to try my hand at it. The full film is available on YouTube if you want to watch it, and will be linked somewhere, somehow, or you can just search the title, it's the first video that comes up. If you want to settle in with your spooky season spoils and watch it with live commentary from myself and a friend who will be starting up her own mythology-based channel in the near future, you can click right here. I kinda rushed to get this out in time for Halloween, so I'll be taking a few days to recharge so I can finally finish part 2 of When Dinosaurs Roamed America. I'm almost done, I promise. Until then, many thanks, stay safe, and I will see you next time.
He has to fight for it.
Okay, no, you're a zoologist. You need to stop. I'm sorry, I'm pausing this because this is bullshit.